What's going on, fantasy people, and welcome to Makin Bank with Monkey Knife Fight, presented by True North Fantasy Football. Trav here from True North. I am live, as always, from Dirty Laundry Studios, and we've recently partnered up with Monkey Knife Fight in order to bring DFS content into the True North brand. Super excited for the partnership. We love all the guys over there. Really appreciate them getting us set up with it, and we're excited as we move forward for what's to come. The beauty of Monkey Knife Fight is that you can keep it simple or you can make it complex. You can do whatever you choose. You can play on a bunch of different sports, and it is a ton of fun. So obviously I focus on the NFL stuff, but you can go into golf games, you can go into NBA games, and a whole bunch more. They're actually getting into a little bit of esports now, which is really, really cool. And so for me, sometimes I like to get a little bit complex. I like to dive in and do a little bit of digging on some of these ones. So with taking the loss last week, unfortunately, after Matt Stafford's efforts to get that game-winning drive in the game against the Bears. Unfortunately, he went over the passing yards threshold that I had taken the less option on. So I thought he was going to have less than 265, and on that final drive, he ended up getting over 265 yards. Unfortunately for the Lions, they didn't get the W because of that DeAndre Swift drop. But I think he can bounce back and be the running back that we want him to be, the one we drafted him to be for our season-long teams for sure. So for this one, just give me one sec. I'll share my screen here. All right, so you can see the Monkey Knife Fight platform. And for this one, because I took that L last week, I wanted to go a little bit big this week. I wanted to redeem myself, and I am going for a more or less game, much like last week. I will get into some of these other games soon. But I'm going to go with the more or less this week. The multiplier on that one is 30 times the buy-in. So I'm going to drop 10 bones on this with a chance to win 300 if I make 6 out of 6 picks correct. So you look down here, you can see the players that I'm going to get into, and I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to dive right into these guys. So the first one we've got here is Patrick Mahomes. 305.5 yards is the line, and we know that Chiefs offense is a juggernaut. He's got stellar weapons in Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. We had that big week one from Sammy Watkins, and I am a huge fan of Mecole Hardman for the future of this Chiefs offense. I think he's just going to be electric with Patrick Mahomes. The Chargers, when you look at them, they did have a low-scoring affair last week against the Bengals, and they do play the Chiefs this week and Patrick Mahomes. So if you look at the defense for the Chargers, they did lose Derwin James, which is a huge hit to that defense in all facets of the game. He was kind of the cornerstone of that defense, and losing him was pretty brutal for them, but they do have a very good pass rush as well. They've got Joey Bosa kind of leading the charge. But when you look at Mahomes last week again, under pressure against a really good D-line in Houston, Mahomes had the third highest completion percentage under pressure in the entire league. So I think Patrick Mahomes, we've seen it. He can handle the pressure. He can dance around in the pocket a little bit, evade that pressure. And all those weapons that he has, somebody's going to be getting open. And he's got the arm and the vision to be able to find them. So I'm pretty confident in Patrick Mahomes in any situation. And looking into his week last week, I mean, he did evade that pressure, but he didn't have a big fantasy day by any means. Uncharacteristically, he had 211 passing yards, which is pretty low for him. And on that note, he only had 147 air yards thrown last year, which is way below what we would anticipate from Patrick Mahomes. And that bears out when you look into the fact that he only threw 2 deep balls. So those are balls more than 20 yards down the field. Patrick Mahomes in that Chiefs offense only threw 2 of them last week against the Houston Texans in the opener. So I think we expect that to come up a little bit. But one thing with this is that I don't think the Chargers offense really has the firepower to be able to keep up with Mahomes. And with them focusing on the run, as we saw last week against the Texans, I really think that if the Chiefs get a lead, the Chargers aren't going to be able to keep up with them, and the Chiefs are going to lean on the run, much like they did in week one. So with that, and looking at the fact that Patrick Mahomes in his career has never thrown for 300 yards against the Chargers. Through those 2 big seasons he's had the past 2, he's never thrown for 300. And last season, he didn't even go over 200 yards against the Chargers. So with those cornerbacks in Chris Harris, Desmond King, and Casey Hayward, I think the Chargers have a really good group to be able to have some tight coverage and make the make the Chiefs kind of lean on the run game a little bit more. So for that reason, I am going to go with less as far as that line of 305.5 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes, because I don't think he's going to hit that against that Chargers defense. Okay, so looking into the next one, we've got Kyler Murray. Kyler had an amazing game in week one. He played the Niners defense, which was one of the best in the league last year. And he did only throw for 230 yards, but he looked really poised. He looked very calm. He took on the former NFC champs from the year before, and he showed instant chemistry with his new wide receiver one in DeAndre Hopkins. All things that you like to see from a quarterback coming into his second year, especially after you drafted him at the first overall pick for Arizona and they cut bait on Josh Rosen. That's looking like a really good move for them right now with what we have seen from Kyler Murray. So against the Niners, Kyler threw the ball 40 times. I think that's something that we can expect throughout the season from Cliff and Kyler Murray. We did see inefficiencies in the running game against the Niners, and I think we just kind of knew with Cliff Kingsbury coming into the NFL that he was going to employ a very pass-heavy offense, and I think it plays really nicely into Kyler's skill set. So for this week, in week 2, we talked about the Niners last week. We look at week 2 in the matchup, and Kyler plays the Washington football team. So definitely not the defense that the 49ers have. And going in Kyler's favor, if you look at Washington's matchup last week, Carson Wentz threw for 270 yards against them, which obviously isn't a huge number. He's not 350 or anything, but that would clear the line of 254.5 yards for Kyler Murray. And along with those 270 yards, Carson Wentz put up 520 air yards, which was the most in the league. And to me, especially in watching that game as an Eagles fan, I felt like Carson Wentz left a lot on the field, unfortunately. He was missing on some of those deep balls. There's one in particular to Jalen Reagor, where Reagor had like 3 steps on his defender, and Carson Wentz still overthrew him by about 5 yards. So I think there's going to be some opportunity to be had for these weapons in Arizona. And I think Kyler can take advantage of it because he is a pretty accurate passer, and he does throw a pretty nice deep ball. So I think he can have a similar game volume-wise to Carson Wentz, and I think he can probably add to that efficiency a little bit. So with a line of 254.5 passing yards, I am going to bank on Kyler having more than that, especially with that chemistry that he has with Nuke Hopkins. Super, super excited about this offense. So I'm going to take more for Kyler Murray to hit 254.5 passing yards. So we just talked about Kyler, and that's kind of a perfect segue into the next guy, who is DeAndre Hopkins. And Nuke went off in week 1. I was super excited to see that. I did have him ranked as a top 5 wide receiver coming into the season, and I didn't see a lot of people necessarily having that. There was a bit of a fade going on for DeAndre Hopkins, and I kind of can see why. I mean, a lot of 4 wide receiver sets in Arizona. He was the only stellar pass catching option in Houston, the only consistent option, because Will Fuller was never healthy for a good stretch of games. But now in Arizona, they do have Christian Kirk. I like Andy Isabella. They've got Larry Fitzgerald. So there are some options there. And with them playing those 4 wide receiver sets, I think the big fade was that those targets could be spread out a little bit more, and that he might not be getting those perennial 150 plus like he has been getting in Houston. But when we look at the numbers, he got 16 targets in week 1. He caught 14 of those for more than 150 yards. So that is a massive game for his debut with a new quarterback, new coach, no offseason. I think that is stellar, and I think that's a sign of good things to come. So the line for DeAndre Hopkins in this one is 84.5 receiving yards. And, I'm not going to waste too much time on this one, because I did take Kyler for 255 plus passing yards, because I think that's a pretty good one to pick. And so I'm going to take the more on DeAndre Hopkins as well. 84.5 receiving yards is like just over half of the yards that he got last week. So I think he can definitely do that against this Washington team that definitely showed that they can get got if they got the right players, and the quarterback can connect with that wide receiver. So that was a good one for DeAndre Hopkins, and I think he will smash that. The next one I think is a solid one as well. And that's one thing about Monkey Knife Fight is it really pays to kind of get in here early, because these lines can change throughout the week. So if you get in at the right time, you might be able to find a line that you might be able to take advantage of, and get maybe some better odds towards getting that win than you might later in the week as these lines fluctuate. So with DeAndre Hopkins at 84.5, I'm looking at this next guy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, at 74.5 rushing yards, and I think that is a solid bet. So if you look at Clyde the Glide, a lot of these picks are intertwined because, like I said, I'm doing the late games, and there are fewer games, so there's fewer players to pick from, a condensed pool, and I was just more confident in the offenses. So Clyde and the Chiefs play the Chargers in the afternoon games on Sunday, and the Chargers, I think, for their defense, they are very stout against the pass, like I said in the Patrick Mahomes piece, but I think there is some room for production in the run game against that defense. Joe Mixon last week only had 69 rushing yards, but we know that Bengals offensive line is not doing him any favors, and Mixon was top 10 in the league in evaded tackles, where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was top 5 in the league in evaded tackles in week 1. He had 2 runs over 15 yards, and I thought he did really well in tight spaces as well when he was trying to get away from a few defenders who were collapsing. He did really well in getting out of that, which is something that we knew coming out of college he was good at. It was nice to see that when he evaded those tackles and got into space, he could get some yards. He didn't break off any huge runs or anything, but it was a good sign to see that he can excel in open space as well as tight spaces. So for me, with that said, and the fact that I think that the Chiefs are going to lean on the run with a good pass defense in Los Angeles, I don't think Clyde's going to get the 25 carries, but I think he's going to be efficient enough that he's going to eclipse that 74.5 yards, because regardless of them leaning on the run, defenses do have to respect the passing game because of all these pass catchers that they have, and I think that's going to leave some lanes for Clyde. So with that one, I am going with more on Clyde Edwards-Helaire to hit 74.5 rushing yards. This next one was a little bit tough for me. Travis Kelce, the line is 6.5 receptions. He needs to get 7 receptions, which it's a decent number to bank on, because it's basically, it means that guy is going to be producing really well, especially at the tight end position. Travis Kelce is one of those ones who does perform every week, but 7 receptions is a little bit ambitious in my opinion. But for Kelce in week 1, he did catch 6 of those 6 targets that he got, so 100% catch rate, which is really nice to see. He is firmly entrenched as the safety blanket for Patrick Mahomes, so that's another feather in the cap as far as this line goes. And I've already taken Patrick Mahomes for less than 305.5 passing yards, so that might indicate that I'm kind of fading Kelce on this one, but I'm actually not, because I don't think Patrick Mahomes having less than 305 passing yards necessarily means that Travis Kelce has to have a bad game. So when you look at the corners in Los Angeles for the Chargers, really good group. But I mentioned earlier the loss of Derwin James. Derwin James would have been the one who was keeping an eye on Travis Kelce and trying to keep him contained. But Derwin James is not there. So for this one, I'm going to go with more and say that Kelce gets at least 7 receptions, because to look at his previous games against the Chargers, he has hit that number. In the first game against the Chargers last year, he hit 7, and then in the second game he didn't, but that was week 17 when they had a playoff spot locked up. And then overall for Travis Kelce last year, he hit 7 receptions in 9 of his 16 games. And the year before that, he hit 7 receptions 8 times. So it feels a little bit risky for me, to be honest, with that hit rate of about 50% over the last 2 years. But I'm pretty confident just with the way that I think this defense matches up. I think Kelce is going to be the guy for Mahomes this week. And I'm going to take the fact that he's going to eclipse those 6.5 receptions. Okay, so the last one. This was probably one of the ones I was most confident with my pick. We're finishing off with Deshaun Watson. He does have a line of 254.5 yards against that elite defense in Baltimore. It's actually the same line that Kyler Murray has, but the difference there is that Kyler Murray is going against the Washington football defense, and Deshaun Watson is going against the Baltimore Ravens defense, which is one of the best in the league. So last week, Baltimore, they gave up 189 passing yards to a shell-shocked Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. And I definitely think Deshaun Watson is a better player than Baker Mayfield, but I still think I'm going to take less on this one, just for the fact that that defense is so good in Baltimore. If you look at last season, Baltimore only gave up more than 254 passing yards twice, and that was the first 2 games of the season when they were still kind of getting acclimated to each other. They had Lamar Jackson in there as a brand new starting quarterback in his second year, and some new pieces on that defense as well. So after that, the final 14 games of the season, they did not give up a 250-yard passer, which is really, really incredible. And I think a big piece of that is the fact that they've got a good secondary with Marlon Humphrey. They acquired Marcus Peters towards the end of last year, and he was a big help for them on their playoff push. So this defense is going to be really good all year long against both the pass and the run. And so for me, looking at Deshaun Watson, I mean, against the Ravens last year, just for instance, he passed for 235 yards, so just under this line. And I think for me, I'm going to stick with that result and say that Deshaun Watson gets less than 254.5 yards. So I kind of expect this to be a bit of a defensive matchup. Houston does have a good front seven. They showed that last week against the Chiefs, even though they got beat pretty well. I think that front seven is still a really good group. And we know that the Baltimore Ravens have one of the best defenses in the league. So I don't expect high scoring, and I think Deshaun Watson is going to be under this 254.5 passing yards. So that does it. That's the 6 entries I got to make, the 6 more or less picks that I took. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. So just to summarize, Patrick Mahomes with his line of 305.5 passing yards, I went for that he's going to get less. Kyler Murray with the line of 254.5 passing yards, I said more. DeAndre Hopkins at 84.5 receiving yards, I said more on that one as well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 74.5 rushing, more. Travis Kelce at 6.5 receptions, more. And then Deshaun Watson against the Baltimore defense for 254.5 passing yards. I went for less on that one. So I really want to thank anyone who tuned in. We really appreciate it. If you like the content, leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe to the TNFF network on YouTube, and check us out on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB, and the website is TrueNorthFFB.com. So as you can see, we are paired up with Monkey Knife Fight, and we really want to thank them. And if you want to get on the action and stack some chips much like I am, go to monkeyknifefight.com, register, place your first deposit, and use the promo code TNFF, and Monkey Knife Fight will match your first deposit of up to $50. So if you put $50 in there, they will match it 100% and give you another 50. So you got a cool hundy to play with. So a lot of games can be entered there, or you can enter fewer games with higher multipliers and really, really watch the stacks pile up. So really, really appreciate anybody hopping in. Can't wait till next week. Hopefully I get this W. I'll keep you informed of that as we come into the next segment of Making Bank. Have a good weekend. Hope you get the W's. Peace.